Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Bo Talifer and Eric Rasmussen. Episode 39, Audiation in the Wild Reboot. Well, welcome us back, everybody. This is Bo and Eric. Believe it or not, we've been talking an awful lot and still managing to continue our conversations, but we haven't been publishing. And so we had a little meeting of the minds, and we're going to change our format a little bit.
Yeah, so I think if you go back and listen to our podcast over the last year or so, we have a lot of really good content, that's in the hour-long length, and a lot of interviews, a lot of in-depth conversations. But I think for the new year, we're going to experiment with episodes that are a little shorter, in the 15 to 30-minute range. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they go a little longer from time to time, but and also just release those episodes twice a week. So it'll be very similar amount of time that you'll be able to listen to the podcast per week in the 30 or 60-minute range. But now they'll be released twice a week, and there'll be two separate conversations. And so I think that'll be a lot of fun to try, and we'll see how that goes for a while.
Yeah, we've bandied about a few ideas, but we want to get more people involved. It'd be great if you want to let us know if there's particular episodes that you want more of. You like these in-depth interviews with, the mega folks, or do you want episodes with, say, a beginner MLT teacher, where you're working with? We've got a bunch of ideas. You came up with a couple too, Bo.
Yeah, an idea that I had, because we often interview people who are at the peak of their MLT game with fully designed curriculums, and though I'm sure those conversations are a lot of fun to listen to. I go back and listen to them myself, which is fun. But I think a really good angle would be if there's any people that are newer to MLT and in the a year or two into it and have started implementing it in their teaching and are seeing benefits, but by no means have kind of finished their journey. Mind you, I don't think any of us have, but I think there'd be some really good conversations about what's the difference between before you get into MLT, what do you think's important, what are you kind of scrambling to understand, versus a year in, what do you start realizing is different than you thought it would be. And I think that'd be a great conversation to have with a lot of people out there. So if you have been using MLT in your studio, whether you're early childhood or instrumental teacher or really anything, we'd love to have some, I guess, teacher improvement episodes that are more down to earth, kind of boots on the ground, getting into specific problems. Because I know for me, I'm a guitar teacher, and that's a specific angle that I had to deal with when I was first learning this. And I'm sure there's there's other kinds of teachers. I'm sure there's trumpet teachers out there, or whoever. There's more specific iterations of the problems that come up, and there's a lot of interesting conversations that can bubble up around those situations.
Yeah, and I think I'll publish a little bit of a survey in the Facebook groups, or where else I can find some feedback for the subjects type, or the types of interviews that we could do. Maybe there's a bunch of ideas that you guys have. You can certainly let us know. We'll try to incorporate those too. We want to just circle our wagons again and give people opportunity to get involved. We need to get back into putting these things online, because we just kind of dropped off the face of the earth. And we still have these other episodes, but we're probably going to can those, starting in the new year, and get some new content for you guys.
Yeah, kind of the reason for our dropping out, getting sick here and there is a bit of a factor. But also, Eric and I are just having these conversations for fun. And I think at some point, the last few we recorded were more fun to have than probably to listen to. So we like to re-record some of these and recommit to a shorter format length and see how people digest that and like that.
Yeah, we haven't stopped having the conversations. We just stopped publishing them because it wasn't filling. I guess our need was just to talk, and we're not going to stop podcasting because it's just, I've grown since knowing, so it's almost been a year, right?
It's funny, I don't know the actual date, but yeah, I think we've been recording for about a year. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and before that, it was a few months before we said, we need to just put this stuff out on the air, and the amount of learning that I've had to grapple with over that year has been fun. For me, I get more juiced going into teaching because if
Me
it
too.
wasn't for this, I wouldn't have had to challenge myself with Engelman or whoever else has come up.
Same here, and I think this is something important for music teachers to think about. We have a job that's very solitary in the sense we are often separated from colleagues. So, you may teach in a group of 15 kids, and that's not solitary by any means, but it's a social job in that sense. But in the sense that a lot of music teachers don't consistently talk to colleagues about their job, and I notice it seems like the mental health and just the quality of the enjoyment of your job goes up when you have good conversations with teachers that aren't on the clock. No one's paying us to be here, and I think
Yet.
that's important for teachers yet. uh, so I think that's important for teachers, and there's lots of different ways people can get involved in the MLT community, and this is something that we hope to provide for people where I'm a huge podcast listener, and podcasts are always the first source of, or one of the main sources of education that I use to just reinforce concepts while I'm cleaning the house or doing anything like that. But hopefully we've, you know, given back to the community because this community has given a lot to me. Mainly, probably, I would say between just the conversations I've had with Eric and before I met Eric, just Andy Mullen's material and obviously Gordon. But between the three of you, I mean, and I got a lot of stuff, and it's been a great few years of getting into this.
Yeah, there's a lot more out there too that kind of, what's the word? I want to say fish,
Fusion.
that fuses. Yeah, why am I going fission? Fusion that fuses with music learning theory that doesn't have to have, instruction theory, for example.
Yeah.
Like it fuses with that. We did a little self-determination theory. We've hit on a few things that can fit well with MLT because MLT isn't a whole by itself. It needs, there's all kinds of techniques that we haven't scratched the surface on, I'm sure, over the years.
Actually, that's a really good point, Eric. That I think when we visualized our own podcast, we noticed there are other podcasts out there and a lot of other content on the internet, like Andy's and like the Everyday Musicality podcast, that kind of go more into the weeds of what's in traditional MLT content. And we wanted to not duplicate that content. We wanted to add something that is worth listening to on top of that. I mean, if listeners want us to do a chapter by chapter blow through of learning sequences in music, we're happy to do that.
Oh
But
yeah, because then the things that I disagree with Gordon would come out really really easily, and I don't do that thoughtlessly at all. There's just things that I think he's got he hasn't considered yet. I don't think he
I
got
agree.
stuff wrong. I think he didn't have time to consider everything. And he always said that here's the theory, you go do the teaching.
Exactly, and Eric, you teach in a very specific context, and you're a master of that. I mainly teach instrumental guitar, and that's the lens that I'm constantly always bringing this back to. So I think Gordon was a researcher. He wasn't in the classroom as much as you are, right? So you're gonna start noticing things that he would, I think, agree with theoretically and in practice, but he didn't have the time to unearth those things. And that's what's important about this community, because I'm sure there's a harp player out there, for example, trying to apply MLT to their teaching, and they're going to discover things about teaching instrumental harp repertoire that the guitar player doesn't deal with in the piano. And that's what I think this community can offer each other. um, and
Yep.
so
Yeah.
so again, like, I'd be happy to do those more classic MLT content style episodes for people who are really learning, but we want to encourage people to listen to the other content creators out there, like Andy Mullen, like is Heather Sholdis does the Everyday
Yeah. So
Musicality.
yeah.
Shouldice, yeah. So there's great stuff out there, and I visualize this podcast as being something that adds to that and doesn't try to compete with that or duplicate things necessarily.
Yeah, no, those are really important resources, and we're not trying to outdo them. We're just doing our own thing.
Not at all.
Yeah, so
Yeah, not at all.
the things I disagree with Gordon doesn't mean I don't like Gordon. He saved my life from doldrum.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah,
imagine?
same here.
Oh my God, if I was teaching names and notes and lines and spaces, and I didn't understand why I couldn't play the blues when I got out of college, and now, like my 5-year-olds understand the blues.
I imagine that experience would be quite quite interesting because again, my famous story about learning sequences being mailed to me. I mean, I already had a lot of this figured out. I didn't know as much about verbal association. I knew I had the theories for what audiation was and how it linked to memory and I knew that
but not
patterns
the
were a thing.
vocabulary. Not the vocabulary. You had the instinct for it.
I had the instinct for it, and I kind of knew like I would recognize patterns in different songs, but I didn't have this whole framework for verbal association and beyond. But I was onto something, and then I just had a book that just was like, you're onto something, and it goes like 100 times further than you thought it did, and so that was my experience.
Yeah, and it parallels what I went through when you insisted that I get into this Engelman because you say so much of what I was already doing, and then I discovered pretty much. That's so
actually
much,
yeah, that's a really good point.
So much of what I already did, I discovered Engelman.
Yeah, I think Eric, your experience with Engelman was like my experience with learning sequences. It's like you were doing it, but now someone's giving you this totally theoretical framework for why it works, and
it's much deeper than you ever thought it would be. Because now I see through that lens, I see how much, how much I'm not teaching well.
Sure. Yeah.
Or where I can teach better. Let's say that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but there is a difference. There's a difference between like being a level 1, dragon and a level 99 squirrel. Like even if you're a very weak dragon, you still have wings. Like once you start doing MLT, you're on the right track, and there's infinite finessing.
Yeah. All right. Here's to the 99 level squirrels too.
The last thing I wanted to say before we finish on my end is just I wanted to thank Eric for editing this podcast. Eric puts in endless time editing these podcasts, and this podcast wouldn't be here unless he was doing that. So I just want to thank you for taking over that side of the work.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting to go through the conversation piecemeal. And some of the things that hit, are really like, wow, we said that? That's really cool. And then, and then 80% of the time it's like, okay, or even not good. There's a few things because we're not trying to edit ourselves and put out a pristine thing, but I so much just enjoy the conversation every time we, sit down in front of a microphone. Even before we start, we've said half of what we need to say. It's like, okay, now what were we saying? We got to put that down. So it's like the conversation's always just been so effortless that we just demonstrate that in our work as we put it out. So
maybe we should change it to like MLT on the streets, just like the street MLT, and there'll be like a brick background. It'll be
well, that's the wilds of the city. So yeah, well, thanks for being patient. I'm sorry we went dead silent, and we've never left, but we're back, and we'll see you down the street.
All right.
All right.